Hey everybody, this is Britton here. I am the president of Blue Manners Online Academy. I'm also the author of the Art of Raising Children for Greatness series, which has 5 books in it. Hopefully you guys know that by now. Today I want to talk about the pursuit of greatness. I want to talk about the pursuit of truth and leaving the bubble. Last week I did kind of a controversial talk. I love to do those because some people accidentally, can't wait to read the next books. Me too. They're almost done. Character is coming super fast. It's going to be really exciting. We're close. It'll be out for sure this summer, Cassie. So it's exciting, and it's a lot bigger than education. Education, comparatively, I don't think this is exciting, and that was a great book. So the next one will be better. Okay, so last week, if you listened to the talk completely, hopefully you guys did, and hopefully you guys are still here. I noticed some people left the group. The deeper we get into the pursuit of greatness, more people are going to leave the book. By the time you read the last book, The Enemy, there's going to be a lot of people who leave this group, and that is because it's controversial. There are a ton of fun mommy blogger sites out there, and they're just totally positive, and they just kind of preach conventional wisdom in kind of a new and interesting way all the time. That's definitely not what this site is. I love to bring out the controversial things because it filters people out who really shouldn't be a part of this group. And they're always welcome, but their philosophy's not going to line up, and they're not going to appreciate what we're offering. So today we're going to talk about the pursuit of truth. Continuing from last week. Last week, I said that there are great books every kid should be reading. So many kids are reading secondhand textbooks, or they are reading a lot of fantasy and stuff. And we're just excited, most parents, that they are reading in general, and that's the goal. So every time they're reading a book, even if it's something like Goosebumps, which is, pretty much worthless, we're excited because they're reading. We've been taught that in and of itself is a great thing. It's educational. There's some educational benefit to a book like Goosebumps. Like, there's vocabulary you can learn from it. It's a creative storytelling. It's good writing. You could glean some things from Goosebumps. But we want our kids to spend their time reading the great books. The great books are the books that have changed history. I usually call them the classics. I really want to get away from that. I know in education, I say that they're classics, but there are some, I don't want you to think of old books. There are modern books that are great books that should be read. These are books that are relevant. They're not always good books. They don't always reflect our worldview, but they're powerful. They might be our enemies' books. Understand who your enemy is really important. It goes back to the art of war, and that's one of the fundamental truths of war: know your enemy. And that's why last week I said that every kid who's studying, World War II history, trying to understand what's going on today, World War II was a major event that shaped our history. It will continue to shape our history for centuries to come. And the underlying elements of that war still exist today. So I said, when your kid is old enough, when they're ready, I don't say go out and buy this book. When they're ready, when we've built up the layers, they should read the book like Mein Kampf, because it comes from Hitler's perspective. He was a major player in the war. And of course, when people read that, some people hear that, they're going to check out of the group. They can't believe I'm recommending that. And I am. I'm recommending you go to original sources. I'm recommending you go, I recommend that, another great book that I read, The Greatest Show on Earth by Richard Dawkins. He's a leading atheist. He's an evolutionist. He is I think he's a Harvard or Oxford professor. Very, very famous. Wrote the quintessential book on evolution, atheism, totally different worldview for me. I have his book. I've read it in its entirety. Why? Not because I support him or his worldview, but because I want to understand it. And I want my children to read it so that they can prepare for battle, seeing the strongest arguments of the enemy. So when I say that a kid should read a book like The Communist Manifesto or Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler, I'm not saying young kids. I'm not promoting those books. I'm saying you need to prepare your kids for battle, and they need to go to original sources, and they need to know the truth. So we're going to continue on that in the pursuit of truth. We want to leave our bubble. When we start off, we have a worldview, we have a bias of our own. We are, we're a Protestant Christian or conservative, or we're Republican, or we're Democrat, and that's pretty much our worldview. And it really twists the truth. And we're not able to clearly see or learn from history because we're literally propagandizing ourselves. We're literally putting our own blinders on. And you can't get a great education if you're blinding yourself and propagandizing yourself. Let me give you an example that's in the news right now. Poor Joe Biden. Poor Joe Biden. So Joe Biden is, I hope you know who he is. He is the presidential candidate. It looks like he's going to have the Democratic nominee to be running for president here in the next few months. He's going to cinch that up. He has been accused of a crime, of assaulting a woman back 30 years ago, okay? It's really funny because if you're a Republican, he did it. We know he did it. He's a bad dude. He did it. It doesn't matter that it was 30 years ago. We just believe her. We just believe her, right? And if you're a Democrat, you know he didn't do it. But a few months ago, you said we should always believe him. We should believe women. We should just believe women because it was conservatives being accused. I think both positions are wrong. It's not a team sport. The truth is, in team sport, we have to have some sort of consistency. And that's the problem I've criticized. So in other words, my take on that, we should apply the same standard. I'm sorry, you can't accuse somebody 30 years later. You can't wait till they cinch the nomination, which just totally throws the Democratic. They had all those candidates they could have picked from. They finally pick one. You wait till they pick that one, and then you're going to throw it off. Look, I'm not a huge fan of Joe Biden. It's unethical. If he's out there doing all these horrible things, then you should have reported a long time ago to protect all those people. And I'm not trying to get into politics today. I'm just showing the inconsistency. Another funny one would be Protestantism. Luther, because he stood up to the Catholic Church, Protestants love him. He's like a saint. He can do no wrong. He is, and if you criticize him or if you say anything, then it's like you criticize Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the only perfect person. Certainly wasn't. And I've had to say things like, about Martin Luther. And it's interesting to watch people stumble over them. Even great intellects of the Protestant movement, I've tried to watch them defend some of the things he said, and it's just ridiculous. They're trying to defend their worldview. They think it has to be perfect. It's a team sport. And if they admit that Martin Luther said something wrong here, then that might just discredit everything he said. And that's not true either. I understand why people do that. Propaganda is important. You want your candidate to be pure as Christ, and you want the other one to be as dirty and horrible as possible so they're not electable. And so you have confirmation bias. You want the other guy to be bad, and you want your guy to be perfect. So I was watching a talk one time on Martin Luther, and so that you guys know Martin Luther, obviously he nailed the 95 Thesis up on the wall. He challenged the Catholic Church, and eventually he broke away from the Catholic Church and kind of started his own movement. But later in life, he persecuted a lot of Protestants, Calvinists, and Catholics, of course. So he wasn't this kind of martyr. And then in the beginning of his life, this is probably the most interesting aspect of Luther. In the beginning of life, he was heavily influenced by Jews. In fact, that's one of the reasons he removed books of the Bible, because the Jews hadn't canonized it. So he's kind of mentored and tutored by the Jews. And today, Protestantism has a very close relationship with Judaism and Zionism. We consider ourselves to be a nation, a Judeo-Christian nation. So anyway, there's an interesting history. So it's important to understand the Jewish question. But the crazy thing about Luther is he starts off that way, and then towards the end of his life, he writes this book called this pamphlet, The Jews and Their Lies. And he goes off. He says that Europe will fall if they don't run the Jews out of Europe, that the Jews are going to overthrow Christendom. And he says all these things. Well, I'm watching this talk by these intellectuals, Protestant intellectuals, and their explanation for that is that in his later years, Martin Luther went crazy. He was senile, so he didn't really know what he was saying. And that's confirmation bias right there. One, you don't agree with his worldview, so you just totally discredit it without saying, what is he talking about? I've never even heard of this before. What is going on with the Jews and the Protestants and the Catholics in Europe? It's curious. I want to know what he's talking about. So I'm not going to discredit him right away. But the other thing is to say that he was just senile. If you read what he wrote, it's not senile. You have to deal with it. And if you don't agree with it, then you have to admit, okay, he got that one wrong. And that's okay. Martin Luther doesn't have to be perfect for us to learn from him. He doesn't have to be perfect for us to value the 95 Theses. Or you can still believe in breaking away from the church, the Catholic Church. You can still be Protestant and still say, yeah, Martin Luther got this one wrong. Or you could entertain the idea and say, what was he talking about? Maybe he didn't. What was he talking about? That is letting the truth lead and following it wherever it goes. That's how you get a great education. That's the pursuit of truth. We leave our bubble. I need to be able to look at issues and say, it's just too easy to boil like World War II down to some crazy genocidal maniac who somehow miraculously came to power, and then he was such a good, powerful speaker that he seduced all the people and they followed him. There was a lot more to it than that. There was a ton of back history to that. Not everything Hitler said, just because he's evil or wrong, doesn't mean everything he said is wrong. Sometimes murderers, lead old ladies across the street. That's hard for us to handle in our mind. We want it to be black and white. We want it to be, good versus evil. I'm sorry, that's not what World War II was. It wasn't good versus evil. If you study history, you know that. I mean, we sided with Joseph Stalin and the Soviets. If you are against Hitler because he was a mass murderer, you have to be against the Soviets. And yet, why did we back them? So it's a more complicated truth. And sometimes it's dangerous, it's scary. We don't want our children to be seduced by that, so we just pretend like, oh, those people, they're crazy and they're evil, and that's the end of the story. Okay, so in the pursuit of truth, that was pretty much what we covered last time. I just want to go over that again because people checked out of the group. As soon as I talk about reading Mein Kampf, they're like, oh, I'm out. Okay, good. Go propagandize your own kids. We're in the pursuit of truth. I want my kids to know what caused that war. So that they can know in the future what caused that war, and we don't repeat that history. But if you just boil it down to something stupid like, oh, he was a genocidal, crazy, racist, sadistic, cultic maniac, then you're gonna miss the next Hitler. You're gonna miss the next Joseph Stalin. You're not gonna understand what caused that war. Okay, another one. The fallacy in the pursuit of truth is celebrity opinions. I say this all the time. I have written. I'm kind of a scholar. I read a lot. I write a lot. I'm saying that my opinion should matter more than a person like Kim Kardashian when it comes to something like, let's say, parenting, okay? And education. This has been my focus, okay? I've written books on it. But Kim Kardashian, because she's a celebrity, she has this huge following. If she wrote a parenting book, she would outsell me 1,000,000 to 1. She would be famous, outsell me 1,000,000 to 1. There's a real problem with celebrity culture. We take so much guidance from celebrity. I hope most people on here don't, but that's a real fallacy. Our kids will get sucked into that. We don't need celebrities because they're good actors or singers teaching us history. It doesn't mean that they know any more. They probably know less. They're so busy playing make-believe and making these films for us. What do they know? That doesn't mean we discredit their opinion every time. Just because they are a celebrity doesn't mean they're wrong every time, but I'm sorry, there's not always truth in that. Another one that I think a lot of people make mistakes, and that is popular opinion. They'll get on Facebook and they want to take a poll. They need general consensus, otherwise they're paralyzed. They don't know what color to paint their house without general consensus. They don't know if they're supposed to spank their kid or not spank their kid or give their kid these medications or not, or vaccines or not. And they go out looking for general consensus. And they think that once they have that is truth. That's the democracy, that the majority will find its own truth. That's a huge fallacy. The fact is that's the worst way to find information. I love that book by Alex de Tocqueville, Democracy in America, because he talks about that, the fallacy of democracy, that the people know best. That's something that we should probably talk about in debate someday. Do the people know best? If I want to build a bridge, do I hire an engineer? Do I talk to one engineer, or do I take a poll? And how do you build the best bridge? I like Mein Kampf. He talks about that a lot in there. He really challenged a lot of my views of democracy and public opinion and stuff like that. And again, that's Hitler. And it doesn't mean everything Hitler did and said was wrong just because of how it ended, okay? So it's an interesting perspective. Even if you believe it, it's fun to have your views challenged in that way. So you want to go to war. I love this. I talk about this. I don't know if it was this book. It might be later. But talking about just the height of insanity. Okay, you have all of America watching the debates between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Okay, and they're talking about how they're going to defeat ISIS. And they both have these two plans. And I just thought, man, that's the height of insanity. First of all, the judges, we're judging what they say. Most people have never served in the military. They don't even know what ISIS is, but they're going to judge based on these two people's responses. And these two people have never served in the military. They have no military background or genius or anything. And I just thought, man, that's the height of insanity. They're not experts in their field. It's all words. It's no science or way to prove anything wrong or right. And it's unqualified judges, judging. So that's kind of crazy. Popular opinion should be shunned. It doesn't matter how many people believe it. Popular opinion changes like the trends. I mean, every day they can convince people, the masses, to do pretty much anything. It's true. I tell my daughter this all the time. I'm like, you know what they did for fashion? I'm like, you know what they did? They got together and they're like, hey, watch, let's show how much power we have over the people. Let's dress them like bums. Let's cut holes in the jeans. We'll make them look like homeless people, and let's see if we can get them to wear those jeans. So that's what I told my daughter. I'm like, you're not gonna wear the holes in your jeans. You're not gonna look like a homeless bum. I don't care if it's popular. I don't care if it's the fashion. We're gonna shun that. They can convince the masses to pretty much do anything. Popular opinion changes the wind. It cannot be a judge of truth. Okay. All right. Corporate news. These are all things you need to be aware of and be careful of. Corporate news. You have to understand. You have a guy like Bloomberg. He owns this huge news company, but he also is an investor. That's a compromise of interest. He's also a hardcore Democrat. He is trying to flip states red. Okay, so even if you're a Democrat and you're like, I love what he's doing. It's really good. He's trying to flip these states. You have to understand that there's a conflict of interest. You might not always be getting the truth, the whole truth. And you can't have a great education if you're not getting the truth. Even if he's on your side and you're like, yo, propaganda is for a good cause, just don't listen to it. That's not the truth. Corporate news. I always talk about original sources. I don't want some Harvard professor from 5 years ago to teach me about World War II history, because he has his own bias. He's grown up with a lot of movies and that he's watched a lot of fantasy about the war. And he might have his own agenda in what he's writing. He might be promoting something. I like to go back to original sources. I like to see both sides. So I like to hear, what did Hitler say about the war? What did Hitler's allies say about the war before it happened and during it happened? What are their speeches? What are the allies' speeches? And you kind of put it together with original sources. When you don't go with original sources and you don't look at both sides, you get a very biased, very false view of history. Another example would be Christopher Columbus. There are so many people right now so ignorant, and they have no idea what they're talking about. Some of them are defending Christopher Columbus, and they don't know why. They've never studied it. And other ones are condemning him, and they don't know why. They've never studied it. They've just read a few articles in the news. Maybe they saw something on Prager University defending him, and then they watched, Adam Knows Everything, so now they know he's a genocidal maniac. When I wanted to investigate that, I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm not Spanish. I don't care if Columbus was good, or I would like him to be good. I shouldn't say I don't care, but I have no dog in the fight. I just want to know the truth. How do I discover that? Well, I go back and I look at the original sources. Where did this idea come from that he's a genocidal maniac? Well, it came from some letters that were written. Some of them have been blatantly taken out of context. The guy who popularized that idea, I think he was a Harvard professor. He's not stupid, so he's just biased. He knows they were taken out of context. And then the other thing is some of his enemies, Columbus's enemies, who want to throw him off the island, they accused him of things. It doesn't mean that they falsely accused him of things. Okay, they accused him of things. Some of the things they accused him of, that is now taken as fact and portrayed to kind of condemn Columbus. Columbus wrote in his own defense, so I can read his letters in his defense. In the end, he was acquitted of a lot of the things he was charged. You can't say they were biased and just whitewashed it, because they arrested him and took him back to Spain, where he stood trial, and then eventually they're like, okay, you're acquitted. Like, your enemies were obviously just trying to take you down. But it's more dynamic, isn't it? It's not so black and white. He wasn't just this genocidal maniac, or it's not that they totally made it up. Like, there were some wars that were fought between Columbus and the Indians. There were some issues with slavery. You know who really hated him? It wasn't the Indians. It was his competitors. It was actually a lot of Europeans who felt like he was favoring the Indians over them and being too harsh with them. That's what's so funny about the whole thing is a lot of people felt like he favored the Indians over the Europeans, and his argument was that yeah, but the Europeans should know better, and they're taking advantage of these people, and I'm dealing with anyway. It's a long story. That's not what it's about. But the point is original sources are really important. If you're studying World War II history, you haven't studied it until you've read Hitler's speeches. You know what he said, and then you know what the Allies said. But we don't do that. We just read Winston Churchill and call it a day. We look at the propaganda posters and call it a day. Not that simple. Okay, science. I talk about this, I think, in the next book. We are being controlled by science. They bring out scientists, and they come up with a scientific opinion, and then it's just considered fact by authority. What is science? Well, we should be teaching our kids the scientific method. When somebody says something is good or bad for you, you should be able to test it using science if it is really science. It shouldn't be dictated to you. And what you should understand right now is when they produce consensus, it can be really tempting to just say, well, the science proves it. You have to understand they've manufactured consensus. Leftists has taken over all the universities. Most of the funding comes from leftist sources. and it is there to produce a leftist agenda or worldview. So, this is one I talk about with this anti-spanking. There was an article recently written, and it said that 99 or 98% of studies or something like that say that spanking kids leads to a harmful outcome. Well, that's pretty incredible. 98% of all the studies. It makes you think that there's 98 independent studies. But when you start digging, you realize it's not scientific. It's actually, most of these studies were conducted by a left-wing research think tank. They're an anti-spanking, anti-punishment left-wing think tank. They're funded by leftists who are trying to ban corporal punishment. And they run most of the studies. Not like they were just one of the 98 studies, or 98%. They might have been 50%. So even though they run all these studies, it's coming from the same source, and they definitely have an agenda. So that's something to understand with science. It's like global warming. They say, oh, it's just established science. Well, there were some scientists who disagree and they got fired. So again, you're manufacturing consent. It doesn't mean global warming is wrong, but let's not pretend like scientific general consensus means anything today when you don't get hired or you get fired if you fall out of line of the consensus. So that's important to know. What I recommend too is one, original sources, and then learning from the masters. And that means following the masters wherever it comes from. If I want to be a great public speaker, I don't want to go take a public speaking class in college where it's a third-rate professor. He or she is not necessarily a great speaker herself. She's teaching a curriculum from a course. You never see great speakers come out of that. I want to go to the original source, the greatest speakers in our society. So one way to do that would be talk radio. I tell people all the time, listen to talk radio if you want to be a great speaker. They are literally, there's nothing else. There's no visuals, there's nothing. It's just their voice. And they are able to hook people and impact people just with their voice and what they're saying. So study that. Whether you agree with them or like them or not, what's the first thing they say when they come on the radio to grab your attention? How do they keep your attention? How do they make you want to tune in the next day? They are powerful professional speakers. So go to the masters. Another great source, we have Winston Churchill. Study his words, study his speeches, studying his delivery, but study Hitler's. I like Hitler because I just said I like Hitler. Someday that'll be a clip that they run. And look what he said. I like to study Hitler for public speaking because I don't understand what he's saying. He's a powerful speaker. I don't understand a lot of what he's saying, but you can just see the gesture and the power of speech through, not through the word, but through body language. So that's a really interesting one. Another good one I love to watch is Putin. He has so much charisma. And people hate him. They're like, well, you're saying something good about Putin. It doesn't matter. You can hate him. You can think he's a villain. He's a powerful speaker. And he has a lot of charisma. I love watching him. He's very cool. I think he's way better than Trump as far as charisma and public speaking goes. He doesn't have as big of a stick as far as like the military and economy and stuff like that. So Trump can trump him in most things. But as far as charisma goes, that's a great guy to study. He has a lot of charisma. But see, a lot of people won't go there. As soon as I say Putin, they say, oh, how dare you defend him? How dare you say anything good about him? I'm sorry. It's a fact that he's a good speaker. And we have to follow the masters wherever it goes. Let me give you another example. I'm not a huge fan of Disney. Someday I'll tell you why I'm not a huge fan of Disney. But I definitely study Disney. In fact, one of the books I showed you last week was like the Bible of animation written by Disney. So I'm absolutely going to study it. I don't have to like Disney as a company and what they produce. But I absolutely love learning from the best, the masters. Another one, Stephen King. Great writer. Published a ton of books. A ton of horror. I don't like horror, but he's an amazing writer. He wrote a book on writing, so I'm reading that book right now. I don't like his style. I don't like some of the innuendo and kind of just filth that he talks. I don't like his novels. They were interesting when I was a kid, but I don't like what they stand for. But I can still learn from the master, and then I can take what I learned, glean from him, and I can produce good content for our site, for our kids. Not horror novels, but good, powerful, godly books that will impact your kids. So learn from the masters. Do not get caught up in that political that religious bubble, whatever you're in. You have to be able to seek truth and greatness outside of that bubble. You have to be open to it, and you have to be open no matter where it's coming from. It might mean studying Adolf Hitler's speech, and then you could master that art and use it to refute him. But he is a master of that speech. I hope that makes sense. Guys, some of you are going to unsubscribe, and that's fine. But I just want to encourage you to keep an open mind to what I'm saying. Again, I'm not defending anything that Hitler did. I'm just saying he was a powerful speaker, and he had a different perspective. He at least knew the other side's perspective on the war, and so we should be studying for those things, regardless of who he is. You can study Stalin, and there were some things that Stalin did for the Soviet Union or for Russia that were actually good. And when I say that, again, people, oh, you're defending. No, I'm not. I'm defending the truth. If you're a pro-lifer, you'd probably be shocked. Did you know that Joseph Stalin outlawed abortion? He actually tried to bring back traditional marriage after the communists before him basically outlawed marriage. They wanted to eradicate marriage in the Soviet Union. So I can say those things and still say, yeah, he's a bad dude. He killed a lot of Christians. He was part of destroying the church and everything. But it's really interesting, in his later life, he staged a coup against the monster, Trotsky. I think that guy is a monster, much worse than Stalin. And he staged a coup, threw that guy out, eradicated a lot of the high-up communists. And he continued to be a bad dude. But anyway, it's not so black and white. And we're allowed to say the truth. We shouldn't live in this crazy, politically correct society where if you say anything about Joseph Stalin, even, oh, I like his mustache, oh, you're a bad person, or same with Hitler or anybody else, okay? We can seek truth wherever it leads. People are not usually absolutely sinners or saints. Most people fall somewhere in the middle. There was only one perfect person, and we should certainly study and learn from him. But we can also learn from imperfect people, okay? You can hate Donald Trump. You can think he's a degenerate person. He's really evil. He's very selfish. But you could also study, and I'm sure that the Democrats are studying, how did he become president against all odds? It's interesting. What did he do? He didn't have, he was a billionaire, he bought it. He didn't. He actually had less money for than Hillary. So what did he do? Don't you want to know? Or you can discredit him and say the Russians helped him and he cheated. Okay, well, you'll never be great. You'll never learn anything. You don't even want to know the truth. When Obama wins, I'm curious, what did Obama do? How did he win? I actually like that stuff. I'm not a huge fan of the Bushes, but it's very interesting. I love studying their family. I think the Bushes are evil. And again, Republicans hate me for it. I don't care. I think the Bush family is evil. I think they're frauds. But it's very interesting, their family dynamic and how they've kind of risen to greatness. You had one brother go to Florida, become the Republican governor, another go to Texas. I mean, it was all staged. They had planned this out. Anyway, it's fascinating. Even Rothschilds, man, those guys have dealt more death than anybody, in my opinion. Okay, they've been the bankers for a long time of Europe. They've funded a lot of wars. Very bad people, but I actually like studying their family history. Very, very fascinating. They sent their 5 sons out to different cities, and they became the chief bankers in all those cities. Very, very powerful, very interesting family. Again, I don't have to agree with them. They can be my mortal enemy. You can learn from your enemy. You should learn from your enemy. Study your enemy. So, all right, guys, before I ramble, I just want to say that continue to follow. Keep an open mind. You don't have to agree with everything I say to learn from me. People do that too. They read my book, Revealing School. It's this thick, and they say, oh, I just on chapter, 40, I really didn't agree with that, so I just shut the book and I can't recommend it to people. It's like, really? Because of one thing? Then you're never going to learn anything. Most of the books I read, I don't even agree with half of it. And that's great because I'm learning. It's stretching me on that other half, okay? Keep an open mind. You can learn from it. You don't have to agree with everything I've said ever, but you can learn from it. If you can't learn from it, then you probably don't belong here. And good luck to you. So, all right, guys, thank you guys so much. I'll be back next Wednesday. If you guys have questions, leave them below. I'm always here to answer your questions. And those will always be the priority. If I don't have any questions, I'll just ramble. So thanks so much. We'll talk to you later.